Hi, everyone. Welcome to today's personal branding coaching session. As you can see, we're doing a tutorial today. These tutorials that we've been doing lately have been really well received because I think that our audience enjoys hearing what we have to say in terms of expertise on personal branding, but what they like even more is seeing it. So, as a visual learner myself, I think it helps to actually see visually what I'm speaking about. So we're doing another tutorial today on formatting a resume. But before we get into that, I hope everyone's having a great day. It definitely looks like spring outside, so that is so exciting. And on a personal level, it's my son's 11th birthday this weekend, so we have a fun weekend ahead. If anyone knows how I can make enormous pancakes to emulate or replicate the breakfast scene from the movie Uncle Buck, let me know, because I will be trying to do that at 6 a.m. on Saturday morning. So that's his little party. So I'm excited about our fun weekend. Hope you guys have some plans to spend some nice time in the sunshine too. So if you're watching live, make sure you give me a thumbs up so I can see that you're watching. And feel free, of course, as always, to tell me in the comments why you're here. If there are specific things you'd like to learn in today's episode or in future episodes, that would be great. And don't forget to tell me where you're viewing from. We get hundreds of views throughout the week, so we'd love it if you take the time to just pop in a little message and let us know where you're from and maybe even how you heard about our Facebook channel. That would be awesome. For those of you that don't know me, I'm Samantha Nolan, a personal branding strategist and expert resume writer and owner of Nolan Branding. We used to be called Ladybug Design, if you didn't know, so we went through our own rebranding to better reflect what we do for our clients, which is helping your careers take flight. My weekly syndicated Dear Sam column is extended every Thursday, just like now, through a Facebook Live session. So we can take a reader's question and really expound upon it more so than my space in your local newspapers will allow. So today we are going to look at the different resume styles that you can employ depending on your current career target and how your background best relates. So as you can see on the screen, we're talking about what resume format should you use. There are three main formats: the chronological, the functional, and the combination. So let's look at a few examples of each and the times that you would use one versus the other, okay? And I'm just going to be switching between images here so that you can better see what I'm speaking of to give you that visual, okay? So let me just open all of these. So first of all, we are going to look at the chronological resume. Now, most of you probably have a chronological resume, which is probably correct. The chronological resume presents your work history by employer, working from your current or most recent position and backwards, okay? So it's, even though we call it the chronological resume, it's really a reverse chronological format. It's very, very easy to understand this resume format. It presents a hiring manager with an easy picture of your candidacy because it will tell them, just like the example you're seeing on the screen, where you worked, when you worked there, and what you did. So a hiring manager is able to look at your candidacy, let's say if you're this particular example and you're Steve, and they can see, oh, Steve is a community relations manager and he worked at Community Action in Frankfort, Kentucky, and he's a manager of employer organizing, and this is when he worked there and this is what he did. So it leaves the viewer with fewer unanswered questions. It is the format that you should use most of the time if you're continuing in a similar line of work, if you don't have particularly large employment gaps, if you haven't hopped around maybe a little more than you wanted to in positions. So it is sort of the standard format. Out of all the resumes I write these days, I would say that a good 90+% are written in this format, okay? Hiring managers definitely prefer this approach, again, because it's so simple to understand. And you're just seeing one example of a chronological or reverse chronological resume on the screen. Your reverse chronological resume does not have to look like this. In fact, I'm going to just flip over to my website and I'm going to show you a lot of different samples that you can kind of scan through here. Again, there's that beachy photo that I always love on my desktop that you probably remember from our last tutorial. It reminds me of warmer days here in Central Ohio. So on my website, you will see lots and lots of samples. So if you go to the portfolio section and click on samples, it will bring up this page and you'll see we have lots of examples. Now, of course, not every industry or field is going to be represented, but what you will see is a consistent theme of how these resumes are approached. And I think probably 90+% of them are going to be reverse chronological resumes. And within those, I just want you to see how they all look different, but they have common elements. So we definitely want your resume to open with a qualification summary. And then if you're creating a reverse chronological resume, the meat of your resume is really going to be in the professional experience section. And in that, you'll notice as I flip through a few examples here, you'll see a consistent theme that the scope of your role is typically presented in a very small paragraph, even when you're being creative in the format. And then your accomplishments are presented in bullets. That is very strategic so that we can really draw the eye to the most important pieces of information on the page, because we all get paid to go in and do what is essentially on our job description, right? That is an expectation. But what we really do to add value is what is contained in those bullet points. And that's really go above and beyond. So we want the reader to draw their eye to that section. Now, I've stopped on this resume because this isn't a reverse chronological resume. This is more of a functional resume, and that's a perfect tie-in to talk about next, the functional approach. And let me just pop over to that page so that I can explain what a functional format is like. Okay, let me find the right page here. Sorry, guys. All right, here we go. So a functional resume organizes your experience by functional area. So as its name suggests, it's not ordering your experiences in reverse chronological order. It is presenting them by functional area. So as you can see by the example on the screen, this person has highlighted their experiences within key categories. In fact, 5 key areas. So financial and transaction management, administrative support, leadership and service orientation, etc. The reason why you employ the functional resume format is because you want to focus a hiring manager's attention on what you did that is most related to where you want to go. So for this particular client, if you look down at the bottom of page 1, you will see an employment history section. And that simply contains the name of the employer, the title this particular client held, and the dates he held that title. There's no further explanation as to what he did when he was a shift manager versus an administrative assistant. And that's very strategic because we don't want the hiring manager to focus on, oh, Well, Mason hasn't actually done that for 6 years, okay? So in the functional approach, we highlight the most relevant, not the most recent qualifications. It's an opportunity for you as a candidate to really bring forward what you cannot afford for that hiring manager not to see on your resume. Maybe you have a much more extensive employment history than this particular example. Maybe what you did 20 years ago is what you want to do now. And so employing a functional approach would allow for focus on whatever functional areas you felt were most important, really putting on the back burner what you did based on the titles you've held most recently. Now, you can probably see and understand how that could really benefit a candidate. It really allows you to paint the best picture of your candidacy. But unfortunately, for the hiring managers, I think hate is a pretty strong word, but they do really, really dislike the functional resume. It's unfortunate because it really used to be a great way to showcase relevance over recency, but because it really presents a disconnected image of what the candidate has done, when and where, it's very, very disliked. There are just too many open-ended and unanswered questions when a hiring manager reads a functional resume. So, what I would say if you thought that the functional approach might be best for you is proceed with caution. If you think that it's the only way you are going to overcome that potential disqualifier of maybe not having recent related experience, or maybe you have some significant gaps in your professional history that you really need to hide, maybe you even scoot that employment history section hopefully to page 2, so it's not seen during the initial screening process, or at least not focused on as much. Because your potential disqualifiers are what is in that employment history section. It's maybe when you worked somewhere or the titles you held that you're really trying to put on the back burner and say, hey, don't judge me based on when I worked there and what my title was, judge me based on my functional skills or functional areas of expertise. In all the resumes I write today, I don't actually remember the last time I wrote a functional resume. It's been years, and that's because there are more strategic ways to present your candidacy than in a format that hiring managers have made very clear that they do not like. But I'm going to show you a couple of other ways you can create a functional resume, just some examples, because maybe you do fall into the category where this is a risk that you have to take to get your candidacy looked at. So let's look at just a couple of examples, okay? In this particular example, you're going to see, this is the one that we just looked at, and hopefully you can see it all now, and you can see that everything is on one page. Now, ideally, for a functional resume, it would actually scoot that work history section to page 2, ideally. We can't always do that just based on the breadth or lack thereof that someone has in their career. The next example I just popped up on the screen is another functional approach for someone that was in the teaching field, and we felt that presenting back-to-back very similar experiences would be highly redundant. So it was actually far more engaging to present more of the functional approach. This last example I'm going to show is a much sort of denser functional resume. And in that, you're going to see we have some accomplishments highlighted in that blue shaded area, but then we have professional highlights organized not by employer, but just based on a common theme of this is what I did as a staff RN in several area hospitals and healthcare facilities. And hopefully you can see that as I'm highlighting it. So in those bullets, we're really going over sort of those core elements that were really evident in each of this person's positions, eliminating redundancy in the presentation of very similar roles back to back, and also allowing for maybe a not so positive work history, maybe frequent job hops, maybe some employment gaps, to not be seen up front and to simply fall into a work history section, okay? So as our main screen suggested, we have a third resume format, and that is the combination approach. So as its name suggests, the third type of resume is a combination of the two that we have just discussed. So it's really a hybrid of that, the chronological resume or reverse chronological and the functional. So as you can imagine, as the benefit of the chronological resume was to show a hiring manager what you did when and where, and the benefit of a functional resume was to highlight relevance over recency, the combination format allows you to do both. So you still open your resume with a really strong qualification summary, but then you actually have a highlight section. It doesn't have to be called selected highlights. It could be career accomplishments. It could be really a snapshot even. But within that section, you are actually going to present some key highlights related to how you're positioning your candidacy now by functional area. So as you can see on this particular example, we have highlighted core areas of functional expertise or skills by organizational development and process improvement, followed by 2 bullet points related to that. Then we're talking about financial planning, followed by another 2 bullets. And then analytical and operational leadership, again, followed by another 2 highlights in that area. That allows Timothy, who is the candidate in this resume, to say, I want you to really look at what I've done that best relates to how I'm positioning myself. So what have I done that best relates to financial planning and analysis, operations management, and business expansion? Because that is how Timothy wanted his candidacy evaluated. But then, because he knows a hiring manager dislikes the functional format and really wants to know what he did, when and where, you'll see following the selected highlight section, we have a professional experience section. And in that section, we are giving the hiring manager exactly what they want to know. This is what Timothy did here, and this is what he achieved, and this is when he did it. So it really is a lovely approach when you need to highlight relevancy over recency without the risk of frustrating hiring managers who leave the screening process with too many unanswered questions. So let's look at just a couple of other examples that are combination approaches. The one that I have on my screen is a little bit different, that still has some highlights presented. This time, select highlights are for the sales professional, and it really allows him to focus on what he has done in his career that was well before when he was a college instructor, okay? So if we would have created a typical reverse chronological resume for this particular candidate, the hiring manager would have only evaluated his candidacy on the fact that he was a sociology instructor, which is not how he wanted to be positioned. So we employed this combination approach to focus on relevancy over recency. I have a couple of other examples here. On this one, this particular candidate wanted to go back to something she had done seriously 20 plus years ago. So we really needed to bring those highlights forward because no one would have ever seen that those skills existed until they got to the middle of page 2, which when you only have 4 to 7 seconds to grab someone's attention, clearly they are not getting to page 2 of your resume. So just a few different ways to present that, that kind of combination hybrid approach to really make sure that you're benefiting your candidacy in the right way. So again, just to reiterate, the resume formats are the chronological, the functional, and the combination. Most of you should have a chronological resume, which is what hiring managers prefer. It presents your current or recent employment and works its way backwards, presenting the scope of your role and the highlights of what you added beyond the job description in a very easy to understand format. The functional resume should be used very, very carefully as a last resort approach to presenting the relevancy of your candidacy and experiences over where you worked and what your titles were. Again, disliked by hiring managers, so used very, very carefully, again, when you don't think you can get your foot in the door with a more traditional format. And lastly, the more strategic and possibly, I'd say arguably, the most complicated resume to write, the combination approach, because you're almost putting 2 resumes together. You're presenting most of page 1 of your resume as your most relevant experiences, and the rest of your resume in a reverse chronological format. So you really have to maintain a very vigilant eye on what the transferability of those past experiences really are, so that your recent experiences still really reflect the same language and keyword strategy as your relevant experiences. It's actually one of the more enjoyable resumes that I get to write, because it really puts my marketing strengths into action. So I love writing combination resumes, because it's like changing the picture of who someone is. And then when the client receives the resume, I just love hearing their comments about, I knew I could do it, and I knew I was what I thought I was, but now I see it. So that's actually, I say it's the most fun resume to write. Perhaps you don't consider resume writing fun, but I do. So I love that format. So I hope that that tutorial provides you with an explanation of not only the types of resumes we have, but more importantly, how to leverage whichever format you think is best to optimally present your brand. So thanks everybody for joining us today. Please feel free to message me privately or email me at dearsam@nolanbranding.com with any questions. We love to hear your questions. If you need any follow-up information following this tutorial, please feel free to ask. Please also send us your ideas for future show topics. Of course, we do try to have these shows be an extension of my column that runs the prior weekend, but we're always open to new ideas. We will see you again next week, 12:15 Eastern on Thursday. The following week, actually, will be a little off schedule. We'll be filming the show live that day with our interview coach, Kelly. That will actually be a day early, and it will actually be in the morning. So we're shaking things up, but we'll be sure to post when that's coming up on our Facebook page. Thanks again, everyone, for joining us. Please share the video so we can help as many job seekers out there as possible. And I really look forward to seeing everybody next week. Same time, same place. Thanks very much. Bye-bye.